Recording in progress.
Flourishing together after tragedy. On June 12, 2016, the world awoke to terrible news from Pulse nightclub in Orlando. 49 people were killed and 53 others were wounded. It was Latin night at a beloved LGBTQ plus nightclub. It was supposed to be a place of joy, of dance, of belonging, and freedom, a place where people came to celebrate who they were. And suddenly that sanctuary became a site of horror. For many queer people, especially queer people of color, the tragedy cut deeply because Pulse, like most gay nightclubs, are more than just a nightclub. It's a refuge, a community. It's their chosen family, frankly. It was one of those sacred places where people who often move through the world cautiously can finally exhale. 10 years later, we still feel the ache and the loss. And yet this morning's question is not really about the tragedy. It's about the flourishing. How did a devastated community continue? And how do people do not only survive, do more than survive, but love again, dance again, organize and build again, even hope again? How did they flourish together after such a tragedy? That question matters to all of us, I think, because all of us eventually face some version of it. Probably not quite so horrific, but we all have loss. We all have betrayal, illness. There's natural disasters. We live in a divided nation. There's community trauma. A moment, frankly, when the world no longer feels as safe as we thought it was. So the question is never merely, how do we endure it? But rather the deeper question, how do we continue to become fully alive? Well, in Unitarian Universalism, we often speak about interdependence. I think everybody in the room can probably quote the inherent web of all existence, the interdependence of us all. So the understanding there is that none of us exist alone. We depend on each other. And our shared values remind us that we are bound together in this web of mutuality, to borrow a phrase from Martin Luther King Jr. After Pulse, that truth became visible in really extraordinary ways. Within hours, people lined up around the block to donate blood. Vigils appeared across the country. At the time I went to one in Appleton, I'm sure there was something down here in Fond du Lac, and I know there was up in Green Bay. Churches opened their doors. Muslims condemned the violence. LGBTQ organizations partnered with Latino groups. Strangers brought food to grieving families. Counselors, tons of them, volunteered their time. In fact, people traveled from other states to be in Orlando to simply stand beside the community and say, "You are not alone." What flourished first after the tragedy, though, was not optimism, it was solidarity. And solidarity is holy. Because solidarity says your pain matters to me, your safety matters to me, and your life is bound up with mine. I think there's a temptation after tragedy to retreat inward. It's understandable, to isolate, to harden, to distrust. Sometimes we even begin dividing the world into categories. I think it's natural. They're the safe people. These are the dangerous people. Those are the good people. Those are the bad people. And then it turns basically into just us and them. One of the remarkable things about the response to Pulse was the way grief became public love. People covered fences with flowers and handwritten notes all over the city. Murals suddenly appeared. Songs were written. Names were read out loud. People danced in remembrance. And that matters. Because flourishing after tragedy, it doesn't mean that you're pretending the tragedy never happened. It means refusing to let the violence have the final word. And there's a profound spiritual difference between moving on and moving forward. Moving on often means suppressing grief. Moving forward means carrying grief together while still choosing life. Moving forward means carrying grief together while still choosing life. The community in Orlando taught the world something important, that joy itself can be an act of resistance. To dance again after violence, to gather again after hatred, to love openly after fear, or to celebrate queer identity after an attack meant to terrorize queer people. This is the courage. And sometimes flourishing looks dramatic and heroic, but more often it's pretty ordinary and stubborn. You all do this, I know. Cooking dinner for a grieving friend, checking in on neighbors, continuing in therapy, don't give up, attending community meetings, planting gardens, singing together. How about showing up for Pride? Here it's in 2 weeks in Fond du Lac, and I don't know the date up in Green Bay, but you have a big one. It's making space for young people to live authentically. So we should be very proud of the fact that here at Open Circle we have Cafe Q, because that's exactly the intent for that space. Flourishing's not denial of pain. It's the insistence that pain will not erase our humanity. And I think there's another lesson in here for Unitarian Universalists. After tragedies like Paul's, communities are often tempted to search for easy explanations. We want neat stories, simple villains, clean endings. But real healing is a lot more complicated than that. Paul's, if you step back and look at it, it existed in the intersection of many realities all at once. Homophobia is the obvious one, but there was racism, gun violence, religious extremism, a bunch of immigration stories mixed in, mental health struggles, and overlaying it all was political polarization. Human suffering is rarely caused by one thing alone, and flourishing requires far more than just thoughts and prayers. It requires sustained commitment to justice. And the Orlando community did just that. They did far more than just mourn. They organized. They advocated for LGBTQ protections. They expanded their mental health services. They created scholarships, supported survivors. They built a whole bunch of memorials, and then really strengthened their community networks. Love essentially became an action. And that's a deeply Unitarian Universalist idea. We don't believe that love is only a feeling. Love is something that's enacted. It feeds people, it protects people. It goes out there and changes laws. It tells vulnerable people, you deserve to live fully and safely. And when communities act together in love like they did, something remarkable happens. I think people rediscover their own personal agency. Trauma tells us we're powerless, but community reminds us that we can still shape the future. So I do want to speak a little bit today about this concept of flourishing and memory. Because sometimes we hear the word flourishing, and this is how I was thinking about it. I kind of imagine happiness all the time, like a Disney movie or something. But flourishing is not permanent cheerfulness. The survivors and families affected by Pulse still carry grief. In fact, there was a whole article in that one I read that I didn't read to you about a mother who lost a son in it, and how she's never been able to come to any of the anniversaries, and she wasn't sure she was even going to come to the 10th one. They still carry the trauma. Anniversaries can reopen the wounds, and we all know that healing isn't linear. You go a little bit further, and then you're set back, then you go a little bit further. Flourishing doesn't mean the absence of scars. It means the scars become part of a larger story, which then made me think about, I've talked about this before from the pulpit, this Japanese art form, kintsugi. I think a lot of people know it, right? It's a piece of pottery is broken, and they fix it with melted gold, so you can see the cracks afterwards. And so the illustration there is that the cracks aren't hidden. They're actually illuminated. And the repaired object becomes more beautiful, not because it was broken, but because the repair itself tells the story of the care it received. So that's like communities here. They're not untouched by suffering, and they're never restored to exactly what they were before, but strengthened by compassion and shared vulnerability. And everybody's more committed to protecting one another. I think that's what's happened in Orlando. People discovered capabilities within themselves they didn't know they possessed. The capacity to comfort, organize, forgive, endure, and just plain old keep loving. There's also something especially important about remembering Pulse in this particular moment in history. Many LGBTQ people today, especially transgender people, continue to face hostility, fear, and political attack. We hear about it all the time. And so remembering Pulse is not only about the past, it's about asking, what kind of community then are we building now? Are people be able to feel safe among us? Are people finding dignity? Are people feeling that they belong to it? A flourishing community is not one without differences. It's where people protect one another's humanity across these differences. That's the work of pluralism. That's the work of covenant and beloved community. And we all know it's never finished. So I keep thinking about something simple, back to where this started. Pulse was a place of dancing, of music, movement, laughter, connection. And the attack attempted to destroy, frankly, just joy itself. We're going to go out there and just destroy joy. But it failed, because 10 years later, they're still dancing, they're still gathering, there's still love, they're still building community, and still proclaiming that LGBTQ lives are sacred. Hatred can wound a community terribly, but hatred cannot create. Only love can create. So perhaps the invitation for us today is this. When tragedy comes, whether personal or collective, may we resist the temptation to shrink our hearts. May we instead widen them. May we become the people who bring casseroles and make phone calls and advocate for justice and sit in silence by the grieving. Don't even say anything. Just sit in silence, hold their hand. Who protect the vulnerable and who keep the music playing. May we remember that flourishing is rarely an individual achievement. It's communal. We flourish together or not at all. And perhaps that's the deepest lesson of Pulse, even after unimaginable sorrow. Communities can still choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and life over despair. Not perfectly, not easily, but faithfully. So may we help one another to do the same. Amen.